Hi there, everyone.
What we usually do here on this space is we start by a few questions on the personal side of things regarding your background, etc. Then we go about a few questions on your company, what are you doing, why, etc. And we try to deep dive on those aspects. So to start, please introduce yourself and especially tell us what you did before entering in the Web3 ecosystem.
Sure thing. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm excited to be on the pod. So I'm Sylve. I'm turning 30 in a few weeks, which is tough, I'll be honest. I'm the co-founder of Hylé. And to answer the question that you had about when did you arrive in crypto, I think I started in like 2016, 17. And what did you do before entering Web3? I wasn't doing anything before entering Web3 because my first job was as a product manager working on the B2B products at the hardware wallet company headquartered in Paris. So I started my professional career in the blockchain space straight up.
Okay, so you entered the crypto market back then. Why back then did you join Ledger?
The reason I joined Ledger is because I really wanted to work in a startup environment. I was really excited about blockchain in general. I think I encountered blockchain first in 2015 because I was a hardcore libertarian back then. I like to say that I came for the revolution and I stayed for the people and the projects. It was just on the back of my mind. I was just looking at it from time to time. Then I had an internship in venture capital, and some of my time was allocated to research new topics. So that allowed me to really deep dive into what Ethereum was. So I wrote a really big blog post, really big research notes about, oh, Ethereum's pretty cool. We should buy ETH, buy BTC. We should buy one of these very weird crypto punks and see what happens. So they didn't exactly listen to me, but that was a really fun experience. Then I wrote my master's thesis because I was in business school around NFTs. And that was, I think, the first paper written about, like formal paper written about NFTs, because that was in end 2017, beginning of 2018. And that's what drove me more, I think, into the blockchain space. So I just joined Ledger because it was a very reputable company. I wanted to work in product management. So it was a match made in heaven.
Okay, I think that's good, and I think that doing research and people that do in crypto, that's something extremely valuable because I've been reading so much in the last year, and yeah, definitely amazing to see that you have written like cool stuff on the ecosystem. We have one question that we ask in general at the beginning of the pod to know a little bit more. Basically, the question is, what is the first crypto you bought, and what is the latest one? So what's the first and what the latest one you bought?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think I bought BTC first because back then in Ledger, like I joined in 2018, and back then it was a lot of BTC maxis. So I think I got BTC Pill quite early. And the latest one probably bought a shitcoin on Starknet, just out on AMM. I think I forgot.
Okay, so that's interesting. And why Stocknet? Are you in some way involved without saying too much about Eiley? I mean, why did you choose Stocknet? What do you do there?
After Ledger, we built the first project with my co-founder Lancel called Brick, and it was the biggest NFT protocol on Starknet. We were the first project to launch on testnet, on mainnet. We started in 21, and the project is now continued by a new team, former people from the Nouns DAO, and that's how we learned everything we know about zero knowledge proofs, about building a network. And it was an extremely exciting experience because we got on Starknet in October 21. So the testnet was only a few months old. We built Brick, which was basically a composability protocol fully on chain. So it was a very early on chain game. You could think of it as a mix between Minecraft and Lego, but running fully on chain. Working with zero knowledge proofs in Cairo and Starknet back then was like eating and like chewing glass, but it was a very exciting experience. We learned a lot about how to build a network, build a community. In our years on Starknet, I worked on the Starknet Foundation as a governance lead, and we also co-created a fully provable game engine using zero knowledge proofs written in Cairo called Dojo, and most projects in Starknet right now are using it. So it's like a version of mod, like the Solidity thingy for on-chain games, but specifically targeting provable applications, and it's written in Cairo. So we spent a lot of time in this Darknet ecosystem.
Could you please just explain what is a zero knowledge proof?
Absolutely. The crux of it, if you really want to do it very simply, it's you want to be able to give certainty to someone that you know something without revealing that thing. An example that people usually use is, I want to prove to you that I know where Waldo is in the Where's Waldo game. And it's difficult because if I show you where Waldo is, I'd want to reveal that to you. So I want to prove to you that I know where Waldo is, but I don't want to show you where Waldo is. So the example that people give is you take a very big cardboard cutout, make a very small hole, and then you press the book on the cardboard box. And then the person is able to see through the hole the little head of Waldo, but they don't exactly know where it is. Zero knowledge proofs are a lot more complicated than this, but the core of the mechanic is this. You're able to prove something without revealing the thing. If you want a slightly more complicated example, I want to prove to you that I have solved a Sudoku without revealing the solution. So what I will do is I will take every line and every column, I will cut down every single number, and all lines and all columns, they sum up to 45. It's the sum from 1 to 9. So I will take a line, I will shuffle the numbers, then give it to you. Then you can count for yourself. It's okay, that's 45. And for each row and each column that we do, your confidence level rises up to the point where it's not really useful if you do the last 3 columns. Zero knowledge proofs in practice work quite similarly, where these are probabilistic proofs. So you give a very high chance, a very high degree of certainty to the person that is asking for the proof that the program has been run correctly. This was a research topic. It was a very exotic type of research topic, I would say 20 years ago. The first papers were in the 90s. And one of my favorite forum posts is by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2010 about using zero knowledge proofs on Bitcoin. And the blog post, the forum post is something like, there's this weird branch of mathematics called zero knowledge proofs. If these things worked, it would be really cool and we'd love to have it on Bitcoin. But we don't, so we can't really use it. It was very inefficient back then. And the first projects to really implement them were first Zcash for privacy purposes. Zcash was, let's say, a version of Bitcoin where you could hide through what they called shielded transactions your transfers. So you would produce a zero knowledge proof that something was transferred, but you couldn't look up who it was sent to, who received it. You were using the privacy aspects of zero knowledge proofs. Now they're a lot more, I would say, popular, and research has surged because they're used to speed up blockchains. The core of the issues that blockchains have is that you're asking thousands of computers to redo the exact same computation over and over again. And that means that you're limited by the smallest computer in the network because you need to make sure that everyone can run the computation. So what you do with zero knowledge proofs is, hey, let's have this very big computer do all the work for everyone else, and then that computer will produce a proof that it has done the work correctly. And then the smaller computers can run in a very decentralized setup and verify the work of the bigger computer. That's basically how rollups work. Layer 2, like Starknet, they do a lot of things outside of Ethereum, but then they will post a proof to Ethereum, and that thing gets proved on Ethereum. So zero knowledge proofs are now in a Cambrian explosion. It started from super hairy research topics and papers 20, 30 years ago. And we're now exiting the research lab and moving firmly into the engineering realm, where it used to be that you need to have a PhD in cryptography in order to produce a proof that you've computed the square root of 9 and that it's 3. And now you can just use basic code. You don't need to be a cryptographer. You can just, let's say, be an engineer to use zero knowledge proofs. And that's very exciting in the field.
Okay, thanks for those explanation about zero knowledge proofs. I think now is a good time to explain what is your company and what do you do exactly there.
Yes. So Hylé is a sequencing and settlement network for provable applications. Very concretely, Hylé is a layer 1 blockchain that does two things. It orders transactions and it's able to verify zero knowledge proofs. The reason we're building Hylé is because we spent a lot of time in the Stock ecosystem, and so we became very acquainted with a programming language that was built by the Stockware team called Cairo. And Cairo is a programming language that allows you to just write proofs. So you can write a program, and that program can be proved. And we thought, hey, that's really cool. And we can build a whole lot of applications just using the language, but not necessarily starting to the underlying blockchain. And that got us thinking, hey, now that we can just run the code of what you've built anywhere on your computer, on a server, everywhere, why should you run this code on the blockchain? Because that's currently how blockchains work. When you send an NFT to someone, when you use an AMM, when you use any application on the blockchain, you're asking all the little computers in the network to do the work for you. So the thing we were thinking is, hey, is there a better way of doing this by just making sure that all the applications are provable? That means that they're written in a language that can be proved. So that's how Hylé works. Hylé is a very specialized network that caters to these applications that use ZK. And our bet is that ZK will be completely ubiquitous, and we're building the network that is most specifically tailored for these type of applications.
Okay, and I'm not an expert at all on ZKP and how this works, but something that I heard, and I don't know, you tell me if it's right or maybe wrong or else, but some people thought that it costs a lot in terms of computing power, etc. How do you manage this? Is it true? And if yes, how do you manage all this computation?
That's absolutely true. In a bit like what Lavoisier, the father of chemistry, said, nothing is lost, nothing is created, everything is transformed. And you can't get your lunch and eat it too. So verifying proofs is great, because if something took, I don't know, maybe days to compute, it takes a lot less time, like maybe minutes to verify. The problem is you need to generate that proof, and generating a proof is costly in terms of machine time and energy. So that's why there's a lot of research that is being done on improving the proving technology itself. It used to be that it would take probably, I don't know, 10 hours to prove very basic operations, and now we're able to prove entire Ethereum blocks, which is a much, much more complicated type of logic. So how do you handle proofs? The issue with proofs is they're really cool, but they introduce delays. Let's say that you want to run an application and have all your users generate the proofs themselves and then send the proof over to Ethereum or Hylé to get verified. It's going to be very costly for them. They may not have access to the high-end hardware to generate these proofs, and they may not be sophisticated enough to use to know proving services. So how do you do this? The way we're tackling this is by making sure that people don't even have to think about proofs. So the way it works for Hylé is people will just send transactions on Hylé, just like you would be sending a transaction on Ethereum. And these transactions will later be proved by different prover networks to be verified on Hylé. So think of it as you as a user will send a transaction on Hylé with a little bounty to say, hey, if you prove this for me, you're going to get that much money. And then that thing gets proved, verified on Hylé, and then you get your funds. So the way we're targeting this is by not requiring users to generate the proof themselves. We're not centralizing proving. We're making sure that proof generation is not the bottleneck for the network and for these applications.
Great, thank you. Also, I have a question. In terms of competitor, do you have some competitor? And if you have some, what did you give in advantage for them? Like, what is the difference from you to another layer one that doing proof verification?
So you have several projects that are doing what we call proof aggregation. Proofs are not only timely and costly to generate, they're also quite expensive to verify. So how do you verify zero knowledge proofs right now on the blockchain? If you take the example of a layer 2 ZK sync, generate the blocks, then a prover will generate a zero knowledge proof of this. Then that proof is sent over to Ethereum, and then a Solidity smart contract is deployed on Ethereum. And so the prover just sends the proof as a transaction on Ethereum, calling the verifier smart contract, and it will tell it, yo, verify this. And it costs between 250K gas to 5 million gas. That's for the smallest proof to the biggest proof. So that's between roughly $15 to a few thousand. And Ethereum is just not made for this. Right now, how blockchains treat verification is just like any other program. So you can write any program on the blockchain, but you have access to special things that are embedded in it. And verification for proofs is not one of them. It's treated like any other. So the verification for ZK Single Starknet is in the same class as an NFT project or an NFT smart contract or an ERC smart contract. So that means that it has a lot of overhead. It's very costly. It's very expensive. Ethereum is just not made for this. And it's quite normal because when Bitcoin or Ethereum were built, zero knowledge proofs were not to the point that we would think that we'd have verification code that could run natively. So what we're doing at Hylé is the nodes of the network, rather than redo the computation and run the Ethereum virtual machine, for example, what they do is that they run the native verifiers for the different zero knowledge proof systems. So that's similar to saying if you want to launch a very resource intensive video game, you use specialized hardware like a graphics card rather than use your CPU, your central processing unit. The choice that we've made is to specialize in zero knowledge proof verification, because by doing this, it means that we can do it much more efficiently than anything else. The trade-off for this is that we don't work the same way than others. We don't have access to an execution environment on Hylé. You cannot tell Hylé to do things. You can only ask Hylé to verify things that have already been done before. But a vision is that ZK will become so good that you will not even see the difference. And it makes sense to specialize in doing this the same way that you have specialized chips for graphic compute. We're basically doing the same thing. The Hylé is a network that is specialized for ZK.
So what is the future now, like in terms of your roadmap? You build that, and what is like the next step?
So we built a first MVP for Hylé using a little toolbox that people use when they want to build blockchains. It's called the Cosmos SDK. SDK means it's a toolkit for developers. So we used the little toolbox and we built a blockchain from scratch. And then we started adding more of the logic that we want for Hylé. So we started adding these verifiers for the different proof systems. And then we started tweaking, and that works. It's already live. You can already try it out. We built an application using it that mixes ZKML. It's a very fun application. You just smile, and it will generate a zero knowledge proof that you have actually smiled, and then you get tokens on Hylé. This is all through test. Don't hold me at gunpoint for it. These things are meaningless. It was just to showcase that you can run an application in a fully provable mode. But we realized very quickly that Cosmos SDK works really well if you don't remove stuff. And because Hylé doesn't need a lot of these things, it can be a lot simpler. And that's where we started to see the cracks in the Cosmos SDK. So we decided that we were going to rebuild basically our own node system or own blockchain from scratch in Rust to make sure that we would have only the features that we need. That allows us to have a lot more control over how Hylé works and to really optimize for zero knowledge proofs. For example, blockchains use signatures all the time. Your wallets use signatures. Hylé doesn't have signatures because we verify proofs. So we verify the proof of your signature. That means that we do not need to choose which curve, which type of signature we want to use, which type of wallet. We only need to make sure that all these signatures can be proved and that we support. So it's like you have a very big funnel and everything gets bundled into a proof, and that we support. That's a really cool thing about zero knowledge proofs. It's like a massive, a giant connector, a giant API for different IT systems.
And so when will you go on mainnet?
Oh, that's a tough one. We're already. It will take us a couple of years, I think. Currently, our goal is to release a new version of the test version of Hylé in the next let's say 3 to 4 months with this new system, iterate on it, build new projects, build new applications, and see how it works.
Okay. And so actually, it's very interesting. It's my first time really talking with someone that is really like building something on this field. One thing that is very important, and that is more on something that we do, which is linked to consumer and especially to traction. So as you mentioned, your layer one blockchain, it's very hard today to be a new layer one, especially in terms of attention, fragmented liquidity, etc. So what is your strategy? Even if you plan to go on mainnet in a few years, you still have a bunch of time to see that. But do you have a strategy in mind to go to get more users, tractions, etc.?
Whole meta game in the past years was to build layer twos. And the reason people built layer twos is because we saw that it was very costly to run your application on Ethereum. If you think about the very early project that were running on Ethereum, you think about CryptoKitties, you think about Sorare, Axie Infinity, and all of them completely clogged Ethereum, each and every one of them. So what they did is they either built their own chain, that's what Flow, like CryptoKitties did with Flow, or they built app chains, side chains, zero validity rollups. That's what Sorare did with StarkX, and that's what Axie did with Ronin. And we realized that the layer twos are still, there's very few of them that actually use Ethereum for security. If you look at it, Optimism, for example, Optimism is closer to a sidechain than a layer two because it doesn't even have proofs enabled. We're still very far from it. What we realized is you don't really get that much benefits from being a layer two. I think it made sense maybe 2 to 3 years ago because that's what the meta was around, and that was the narrative around Ethereum growth. But all in all, the way that proving technology is evolving, there will not be a difference between a different layer one blockchain because each of these blockchains, each of these networks will be able to be fully proved. And then you'll be able to verify the proof of these blocks on other blockchains. And that will be really good for bridging because it means that you get instant bridging thanks to ZK because you know that, okay, this guy deposited the money on the bridge contract and you can send that information and verify it on the other chain, then you can unlock the money right away. But that means that the difference between layer one, layer twos is going to completely blur. You're just going to have ZK bridges all over, and being a layer one or a layer two will not make much sense. Also because the way you can very clearly see that people are now moving to app chains because the issue with layer twos is that you have a fundamental misalignment of incentives. Why would you be on a layer two if you're an application developer? You're on layer two because you have access to liquidity, all that good stuff. But in the end, you don't really care if you're there. You would much rather have control over your own stack. You would much rather have control over the sequencing of transactions, over much more of this. It's like living in a co-living rather than in your own apartment. Like you
I agree,
for it.
but and actually, I was in Token 2 weeks ago in Singapore, and I listened to talk about exactly these topics: app chain, no app chain, because we see on some part that people do okay layer one, layer two, even layer three, and some other defend the thesis of app chain. And an interesting answer on why app chain may be also difficult was about the comparison with building an app on a phone. When you build an app on a phone, it's the same. The comparison was basically okay, you want to build an app on a chain and you build your own chain is similar to building your own phone while building the app on this phone. And so what this means just about cost and complexity. So do you think that we'll still have some app chain even regarding the cost that it could bring and the complexity? And even if we put apart the liquidity side that you mentioned, because if we go on the ZK part, you already answered the fragmented liquidity issue. When building a company, you still have the focus issue where for me I think it's difficult to either build a chain and an app, and also it costs a lot. So yeah, that's my point of view on this part.
That is currently really true. because the way that people think about these things is because they want to build app chains. And what are app chains? App chains are blockchains that are only used for one single application. There is a fundamental misunderstanding about what you want as an application developer. It is true that it is very costly and very difficult to build a blockchain yourself. And if you're an application developer, you don't want to do this. The question is, wait, do I really need to be fully on the blockchain for this? And that's where we're getting now. Now that you're able to basically prove anything and generate zero knowledge proofs of anything, you do not need to build an app chain. The only thing that you need to do is make sure that the application that you're building can be proved. And that's it. You do not need to build blocks. You do not need to build indexers. You do not need to reuse the OP stack. It makes sense if what you're doing really requires your application to run like a blockchain. For everything else, you do not need to be a blockchain. So I think the comment from that person is at the same time very true and extremely wrong. To take a very concrete example, it's been 16 years since the Bitcoin white paper, and it's been 16 years that we want to put the banks on the blockchain. That has been the thing that we've been saying for 16 years. And we try everything. We even try to have the banks build the blockchain themselves. That was Hyperledger Fabric. And you had a bunch of banks managing nodes for private blockchain together, and it didn't work. I think fundamentally, it's like the meme between the guy who's pointing at the moon and the other one looks at the finger. Why do you want to be on the blockchain? What are the affordances that you want to have? You want your users to have more control. You want your system to be censorship resistant. And you would also like, optionally, for it to be private. Running a blockchain, like building a blockchain and being fully on the blockchain, is one way of achieving this. Using zero knowledge proofs is another. And it's now competing with that first way of building things. The pipe dream that we've all had was, yeah, of course, Bank of America is going to burn every single line of code that they've ever written and rewrite everything in Solidity. And I'm actually quite impressed that we managed to delude ourselves into thinking this. The way it's going to go is, first of all, Bank of America is never going to do this. And second, they will keep their own code. They will keep their own system. They're just going to generate zero knowledge proofs of how their systems work and send that to the blockchain. And that's it. And that bit, like building the zero knowledge proof systems that allow you to do this, is super difficult. But lucky for us, you don't need to redo that every single time. You now have systems like ZKVMs, which are ZK virtual machines, where you just take your code, put them in the virtual machine, it runs, it's very slow, but then it generates a proof. And that's okay. You don't need more than this. So I think the comment is very true and completely misses the mark.
Okay, I think it's a very good answer and an interesting one. So we digress a little bit on this question, but to continue about this distribution question, what is your distribution strategy? Do you have any insight that you can give us? Maybe which type of people are you targeting? Web3 to start? Do you want to go also on the Web2 side and target Web2 businesses? And what is the strategy for this distribution and bringing people on Hylé?
I think I'm super excited about wallets. It's one of my favorite piece of technology, obviously because I worked at Ledger, and being very early on Stocknet, I managed to, it was I think the first network to implement something called account abstraction, which means that your wallet is a smart contract rather than just a very dumb key. And that's something that always interested me, the wallets, because on anything on the internet, you start using the website, then it asks you to build an account. On the blockchain, it's the opposite. It asks you, the first thing you do as a user on the blockchain is, hey, download the wallet. Why? I don't know. Just download the wallet. And it's very cumbersome and it's very difficult to use. You have all these guys that are making fun of you because, oh, this guy is dumb. They did not secure their 24 words and buried them on a metal plate in their backyard. Somehow, we all believe that this is the normal way of doing things. The you're asking is a really good question. And I believe that if you're only targeting Web3 users, you're doomed. because everyone is competing for the same, maybe 500,000 people over the planet. This is a ridiculously low amount of users and people. Our strategy there is to leverage all the really cool affordances and features that zero knowledge proofs give you. To give you an example, there is a project called ZK Email. It allows you to generate zero knowledge proofs out of the emails that you send. So, for example, if you receive an email from your bank with your bank statement stating that you have 100 euros on your bank account, you're able to produce a zero knowledge proof of that. So I'm able to go to Margot and tell her, hey, here's a zero knowledge proof that I own more than 50 euros. And that's because I use ZK email. So if you trust the bank, you're able to trust that the bank has sent this to me. You can use the same system to build wallets. You can onboard people on the blockchain without requiring them to download a wallet, just with existing Web2 systems. That's the really cool thing about ZK proofs. You can take existing two systems, prove them, and have them interact on chain. So in terms of affordance and strategy, it's really cool because you can start doing normal marketing. Hey, just like what PayPal did with referral links. If you invite 5 people on PayPal, you get 10 euro and they get 10 euro. You can do the exact same thing because using this thing, for example, your email is your wallet. So I onboard Margot, then she onboards you, you both get 10 euros, 10 tokens, and you go on. And this is impossible to build without zero knowledge proofs, basically.
Okay, very good answer. But if we look at the wallet landscape at the moment, I can still download a wallet, for example, on my phone with a kind of easy experience where you even have tool. Now, if I build an app, I have tool like Privy, Third Web, all those guys that enable us to just mention with only an email or a Twitter account to create a wallet, basically, without having to sort those 12 words, etc. This is my point. I've been talking with a few other builders, and something that and this is what I don't know if it's really about I disagree with you or agree, but I think that for the wallet, I think we are beginning to see an interesting shift with those wallets. It will be much more. For example, I think that wallet will become real social apps, because from wallets you will use maybe on-chain discovery tools, socials, etc. And this is the kind of things where I think we will go. So on the part of what you said about not having any more wallets, I think we will still have wallets, and those wallets will become not only wallets but real social apps. And the question is, with zero knowledge, I don't know if this is the tech that is used by some of people doing account abstraction. Of course, this is used by Starknet, etc. But for example, guys like Privy and Third Web that already enable easier onboarding phase. Is there some difference with those guys?
I know exactly what you mean there. I think the efforts that they make on the onboarding side is misplaced. Let's think about Google. When you first wanted to use like Gmail or Google Sheets, did people tell you to use Gmail, or did they tell you create a Gmail account? The fun thing with blockchain is that you start with the account, and that we're trying to sell people accounts, and the accounts, they exist. That's the very, very weird thing. You have an application on your phone that's your account. And I understand what you mean about it's a mix between SocialFi, it's also your window into blockchain. They're basically web browsers. The problem is they're very bad web browsers, and they're making progress there. But if you think of it, you never start with the account on anything on the internet. You end with the account. I do not know how many accounts I have right now. I don't know. I look at Dashlane, my password manager, and maybe, I don't know, rough estimate, I maybe have like 600 of them. Some of them have different passwords. Some of them I even forgot. Wallets work the opposite way. It's an object, it's a keychain, but that's not how accounts work on the internet. My take there is that wallets will exist, but it will remain a very niche type of application. I do not think that people will onboard by having a wallet application on their phone. I think people will onboard by not even knowing that they have a wallet. And that's why I'm very excited about ZK. because it allows you to use existing Web2 systems as authentication without adding anything in the mix. I log in on the app using a zero-knowledge proof of my email, and that's it. And I think that is much more powerful. I have a very funny story about this. When we were on Starknet, we were very close with the Argent team. They're pioneers of a kind of abstraction and smart wallets. And they built something that we had been requesting for a while, which was a web wallet. So web wallet is something very similar to what we're discussing here. What I wanted is for people to go on Brick, start playing, and just use their email address to connect to the application. And there would be a smart contract deployed with that email address, all that good stuff. But I did not want the users to download MetaMask, ArgentX, or any other type of application, because that's still fucked up when you think about it. Like, what? I don't want to have to download another app to use the app that you're already trying to sell me on. And when they did this, we realized that, first of all, it worked. It was a really good experience. But I've run into really fun issues. I made a transaction, and then I sat there and I was like, wait, where is it? And I was looking for my wallet. Because this is my Web3 habit. I use my wallet to look at my account, to look at my balance, to look at my transactions. That's my safe space in a sense. But because I wasn't using a wallet there, I was lost. I was asking, wait, where did the transaction go? And then I asked my co-founder, I said, oh, do we have something in the UI of Brick for me to see this? And I realized that, oh, okay, dApps right now, they can have very lousy experiences because the wallets need to take care of that. You don't need to provide necessarily an account history, a transaction history, a full dashboard of everything, because the wallet will take care of this. And I think it's going to take a lot of rewiring in UX and developers' brain, and app builders' brain, and even users' brain. And I think there I got into massive arguments about this topic, but I really do not think that the current UX that we have on the blockchain will be mass market.
Yeah, I agree with you on this point. Definitely, the UX is still shitty at the moment, but hopefully it will evolve and it will be better and better. You know what? I really like your vision on this, and I can only agree with you on those parts. Maybe a quick question that we need to ask, and even if the mainnet is not for now, etc., we usually ask the people that come here if you will have a token. So will you have a token in your ecosystem? And if yes, how this token will be implemented and works with your entire ecosystem?
This is a super hard question to which we do not have an answer at the moment, because it Hylé doesn't work like other networks. Something as trivial as managing transaction fees, for example, is super hard. So we asked a couple of teams how they handle these sorts of things. Like, how do you handle a token for payment, a token for transfer? It's super easy if you do it, let's say, the Ethereum way, but it's very difficult if you try to do it any other way. Long answer, short answer, Hylé will have a token. It's necessary for governance, it's necessary for decentralization, for proof of stake, all that good stuff. How exactly will that be implemented? We still have way too many things to figure out before we can talk in more details about that.
Okay, very good. And also, there is something that we haven't talked about yet, which is about the Onchain name system that you're building. Can you tell us a bit more about what is it and how is it different from something like ENS?
Yes. So ENS, the Ethereum naming system, is really cool because who are you on Ethereum? You're OX for ABC something, and it's very difficult to know if you're sending money to the right address. So what ENS provides you is the dumbest smart contract in the history of mankind compared to its usefulness, which is a table where you have your address, and then on the next column you have your name. So rather than say, oh, I want to send money to 0x4986, you say, oh, I want to send money to Armando. The problem is that this thing is not implemented natively. So smart contracts cannot call Armando.eth. Smart contracts need to know Armando's address, and everything needs to know this. So it would be similar on the internet to every single service needing the exact IP address of everyone else, rather than knowing the URL. knowing the domain name. And so that's what we're enshrining on Hylé. We're enshrining the fact that contracts will have basically domain names so that it becomes much easier to find them and becomes also way easier to interact with them from a Web2 perspective. It will look a lot closer to basically a DNS system. There's a lot we need to figure out there, but our intuition there is that it's fundamental enough that you need to enshrine it at the protocol level.
Okay, it's good. It's interesting. And so now, just quick question on your network. Can we test already this on testnet, or you do, because you mentioned that you're doing some kind of not MVPs, a few kind of tests. Can we test already that on your testnet?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go on vibe.hylé.eu and you can try Vibe Check, our first application. You can see the devnet. Be aware, it's highly experimental, it's highly slow, and it's highly orange.
Okay, nice.
I just have a question. If I understand well, as the ZKP give more privacy, it could be like a subject or a problem with all the regulation stuff, or how it work on that.
That's a good point. It's quite difficult to know exactly how regulation will look at privacy in ZK. The good thing on that front is you have the ANTS, l'Agence Nationale des Titres Sécurisés, the agency in France that is taking care of your passports and stuff like this, that is investigating using ZK for privacy. For example, there are I don't know if the bill has passed or if the law has passed yet, but there are a lot of discussions regarding gating certain websites, adult websites, for example, to minors with a lot more stringent regulation. And it's quite difficult to do. So the way they do it now is either they require a full KYC or a credit card imprint. But neither of these are very privacy friendly. So the best solution for this are solutions using ZK Passport. Your information on your passport is signed by the government, which means that you're able to produce a zero knowledge proof that you are over 18 and a French citizen. And that came from a correct passport. So you could go on a website, and that was a hackathon project by your team. They built something called Corn Hub. And if you want to go and see corn on Corn Hub, you needed to produce a zero knowledge proof that you were above 18 with any type of compatible passport. And because these passports are standardized, it means that it's very easy to do. So I think regulation at the moment is not really looking at it. I don't think it will be much of an issue. But rather, I do think that it's a very exciting opportunity because this is impossible to do in any other way.
Okay, yeah. And also, it's more maybe if you have an opinion on that. But of course, we heard a lot of ZKP stuff like this because it's sometimes I feel like in crypto you have some trends and then you feel the Twitter gonna be on this topic. But do you think it's like really unstable like for everyone?
So
I don't think it really matters the same way that people do not know that their connection on the internet is secured by HTTPS or they don't know what TLS is. But they do know that there's a big red warning when these things don't work and they're going into a phishing attempt or accessing a bad website. I think it's going to be the exact same thing. Users shouldn't care about that.
yeah, I think that's I think that the sense of the question was more on the narrative part. So, you know, that in the Web3 ecosystem, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but extremely narrative driven. When we see all the narrative we have now, we know that it's important that if we want a narrative that works well, it needs to be easy to understand. And that's exactly the case with, for example, meme coins, which is, I will not say useless for the society, but that is not the most useful thing that we have as human created. But if we look at the narrative, everybody is going there because everybody can understand a meme. So do you think that because at some point, even if you want to touch Web2 people, etc., you need traction? And what we see at the moment that you have traction because people are interested by what you do, and in general, it's because of several use case of or marketing, etc. And so do you think that this topic, because it's a very interesting topic, but it's also not the simplest one. So do you think we'll still, how will you manage this And do you think you will keep up on the narrative part?
I think it's a good question. What kind of affordances and what kind of technology can be built using ZK that can't be built anywhere in any other way? I think it would be a fun mix of privacy-oriented applications and just more decentralized application. A good example that I can give you is how would you build a dating app in a decentralized fashion? It's not something that is very trivial to do because you need to be able to hide information. And I think that the progressive disclosure, the ability to select what kind of information you want to give to people, is a unique thing that is provided by ZK and that you cannot do in any other way. So to be quite honest, I do not have the good answer to that question. What we do know is there are thousands of really cool use cases that you can build with ZK that allow you to be more decentralized, faster, and especially more private. I don't exactly know what will be the meme coin for ZK, but I think it's something regarding selective disclosure of information to other people. Something that you can do with ZK is you can build an ERC20 that can only be traded by people of a certain nationality or people that have managed to produce a zero-knowledge proof that they be doom up to a certain point. And these are very like stupid examples, but this is only possible using ZK. I think the privacy aspect, the ability to keep integrity while keeping privacy at the same time is going to be the very interesting thing.
Okay, and maybe I have a quick question, maybe to finish. I think you're probably already discussing or look at the work of Sysmo, that, if I'm correct, worked on those kind of subjects. Are you using some part of their tech or research to move forward? Because, for example, the example you just shared reminds me of a discussion that I had with Sysmo. So do you use kind of their tech or looking at what they build at some point?
I never really followed Sysmo too closely. From what I remember, they were using ZKPs to disclose personal on-chain information to other people. They were really early to this. It's very impressive what they managed to build. To be quite honest, I don't even know what kind of tech they built. The thing I do know is that the ZK tech moves so fast that even stuff that we were using 6 months ago are useless right now. So I'm not sure exactly what we could reuse from that.
Okay, thanks. I don't know if Margot, if you have some other questions.
I think I'm good, but it was really interesting, and thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a lot. And if you have a last word or something, if you go to some URL events where we can meet you, etc., please, you can share it now if you want.
Absolutely. We'll be going to ZK Summit in Lisbon next week, and then we'll be at DEF CON in Thailand in November. So looking forward to seeing people there.
Yeah, nice. We will meet there in Thailand.
Definitely.
Amazing. Thanks for your time. Thanks a lot. And yeah, see you next week, guys. Bye.
Yeah,
Cheers.
thank you very much. Bye.